What's Shavuot all about?
The Torah.
Receiving the Torah. And what does it mean to us? Okay, we know what the tagline of it is. We know what, if you put into ChatGPT, what is Shavuot all about, spit out it as. But what does it mean to us as Jews today?
It's a reminder that we were chosen and we chose.
Okay.
Like kind of a renewal that we have a book that tells us how to live our life.
Okay.
It's a connection for all Jews. As a Torah, it is a connection. We can have different lives, different everything, but it is connection.
It's what connects us all, right?
Yep.
Kind of like tradition, right? It's interesting because if you think about the Jewish holidays, there's two kind of forgotten Jewish holidays in the calendar, and Shavuot is one of them, right? Like people know about Passover and they know about Hanukkah and they know about the Yom Kippur. Shavuot and Sukkot are the ones that kind of like people don't really know so much about it, which is interesting because Shavuot is the one where we got the Torah, which is what you said is kind of unites us, I would say, unites us as Jews, right? Like that's more than anything else, right? It's the fact that we have the Torah that unites us as Jews, right? It doesn't matter what you believe in, you know, you can have Jews of different beliefs, you have Jews of different ethnicities, different ideologies, right? But what unites us is the Torah. Now, it's interesting because when it comes to the Torah, when we talk about like the mitzvah, there's two different categories of mitzvahs. There's those between man and man, like don't steal, don't kill, don't tell a lie, etc. And those between man and God, right? Like keep Shabbat, eat kosher, pray, right? All those different types of mitzvahs. Are the mitzvahs still relevant nowadays? And generally, when people sort of have an issue with the mitzvahs and say these are kind of outdated, it's generally not the ones between man and man, right? I've yet to meet a Jew who's kind of like, I don't believe in the Torah, like I don't believe in not killing, right? Like that's so outdated, right? I don't believe in not telling a lie anymore, right? The ones that we kind of struggle with, you may personally struggle with telling the truth or whatever, right? But we don't struggle with the concept of it. We agree that we can get behind the idea that it's good to tell the truth, that we can get behind the idea that you shouldn't take something that belongs to someone else. The ones often that we struggle with are those between man and God. And I think it doesn't matter really where you are on the religious spectrum, because I think this can pop up in wherever you are on the religious spectrum, right? Maybe it's Shabbat, you're like, I kind of like the idea of Shabbat, or I kind of don't, but like, it can be a struggle, right? It's those are the ones that are between man and God are the ones that we often struggle with, right? Kosher, for example, so many of the different commandments. So we're like, how does it apply to my life as a Jew? Does God really care, etc. about it? So I thought what we'll try and do today is kind of look into this a little bit and sort of, get a little bit of an understanding of what the mitzvot are and if and how they're still relevant to our lives today. Okay? So we're going to start with an interesting piece of Talmud. So the Talmud is talking about the Jewish holidays, and there's a debate in the Talmud whether the Jewish holidays should be spent with physical stuff like eating and being with other people and enjoying ourselves, right? Like Shabbat has that element to it, or whether they should be spent in prayer and studying Torah, right? So the Talmud is discussing this backwards and forwards. Should they be physical or should they be spiritual, the days? And they come up and they say that it should be, the phrase is Chatzi Hashem, Chatzi lachem, right? Half should be for God and half should be for you, right? Like half of the festival should be for God and half of it should be for you. Interestingly, and they debate whether it's true, whether it should be or not. Everyone agrees that when it comes to Shavuot, the festival of getting the Torah, that it should be half physical. Half of it should be spent in physical enjoyment, right? Like food, resting, whatever we do to feed our physical body. Why? If any of the festivals, like Shavuot is when we got the Torah, right? If any of the festivals, there should be an argument that it should be all spiritual, it would be Shavuot. Why does the Talmud say that this is the one that we know for sure? Everyone agrees that it should be half visible. We're going to keep that question in mind, and I'm going to tell you a little bit of a crazy sounding midrash. Okay, so the midrash says that when Moshe went up to Sinai to get the Torah, right? So Moses had like this incredible level of prophecy that he sort of went up to heaven to receive the Torah. And what happens is the angels see that Moshe's come to get the Torah, and the angels say, no, why is this person getting the Torah? Right? Like, and they argue with God and say, this person does not deserve the Torah, right? The Torah is holy. It doesn't deserve to go to a human being. So what happens is, I told you it's a crazy sounding midrash, right? That the midrash says that God made Moshe look like Abraham, right? And said to the angels, why are you arguing, right? When you went to visit Abraham, referring to the story of when the angels went to Abraham and Sarah to tell them that they were going to have Isaac, you the angels ate meat and milk together. Therefore, the Torah belongs, these people can get the Torah. And the angels apparently listen to this, they see Abraham, they listen to this reasoning, and they're like, okay, fine, we back off. What is going on? What is going on? Like some weird plastic surgery going on in heaven, right? Where Moshe gets turned into Abraham. What's going on? So I mean, it's pretty impressive plastic surgery, making him look like Abraham.
Yeah.
Before I explain to you what was going on, let me explain to you the difference between Torah law and rabbinic law. There's different types of law. There's law that comes from the Torah, that's written in the Torah. For example, thou shalt not eat meat and milk together, right? It's different wording in the Torah, but not to eat meat and milk together, that's from the Torah. Now, what's the idea behind the Torah law? Very briefly, in essence, what it is that there is a spiritual harm that we would come into, or a spiritual benefit that we will get by either transgressing or fulfilling the mitzvah, right? So, for example, when it comes to something like don't tell a lie, we understand that it's spiritually harmful to tell a lie, right? It harms us, it harms the people that we tell a lie to, etc. When it comes to something, for example, like kosher, not eating meat and milk, the idea behind it is that there's something spiritually harmful, whether we understand it or not, about eating meat and milk together, and that's why the Torah says, don't do this. Or there's something spiritually beneficial about keeping Shabbat, and that's why the Torah says, do it. Now, rabbinic law is different, though. I'll give you an example of a rabbinic law. A rabbinic law is we wait between meat and milk, right? After we finish meat, depending on the custom, an hour, 3 hours, 6 hours, whatever it is, we wait a certain amount of time before eating a dairy. What's the idea behind a rabbinic law? The idea behind a rabbinic law is that at some point in Jewish history, our rabbis recognized that as human beings, we have weaknesses, and we may be prone to transgressing a mitzvah or an avera, and they put in place something to safeguard that. So it could be there's nothing spiritually harmful about that particular thing, but it's put in place as a safeguard to stop us from doing it. Now, in terms of legal bindingness, it's the same. What is it? It's a safeguard, and it reflects, it's an interesting thing because it reflects that as human beings, we have our weaknesses, right? You know, an angel doesn't need a rabbinic law because they don't have their weaknesses. And it also reflects that we have a desire to overcome that weakness, right? So let's go back to Abraham's story. What happened then, right? Why did Abraham serve the angels meat and milk? Meat and dairy. Abraham, we're told, kept the Torah, even though the Torah hadn't yet been given. He knew prophetically what was going to be in the Torah and kept the Torah. And the angels, they're not like human beings that have a desire, temptation to eat a cheeseburger, for example, right? Why did they, even if Abraham served them, why did they eat it, right? Like, why did they choose to pretend to eat the meat and the dairy together? They could have just had the meat. They could have just, just not had the dairy. Yes, we were going to say.
Because they're not human and they won't be affected by the negativity of eating them together where humans would be affected.
Very, very clear. Very, very close, right? Because what's going on here is Abraham knew the law, right? And the law is don't eat meat and milk together. So he didn't serve them meat and milk together. But he recognized that these were angels, and that as angels, they don't have the same human weaknesses. Therefore, the rabbinic laws are not relevant to them, right? Because the rabbinic laws are only there because we recognize that as human beings, we have our weaknesses, right? We have our temptations, we have our struggles, and they're there because we recognize it and we have a desire to overcome it. Now, these angels don't have those weaknesses, they don't have those struggles, they don't have their temptations, so rabbinic laws aren't relevant to them. So what was God telling the angels is he's saying, you misunderstood the point of the Torah. And I think we sometimes misunderstand the point of the Torah too, right? The angels are saying, the Torah is so holy, right? It's such a divine way of living. Why are you sending it down into earth where people are going to transgress and make mistakes and mess up? And Hashem is telling them, listen, I'm going to remind you of a pivotal moment in your history when you ate meat and milk as part of the same meal, even though it wasn't the same mouthful. Because you as angels don't struggle. That's not who the Torah is for. The Torah is for human beings who are going to mess up, who are going to struggle. Interestingly, this is one of the reasons why we have a custom to eat dairy on Shavuot. Right, it's because this idea, this concept that, and when I said that, we sometimes make the same mistake. Like, how often do we sometimes feel like, I'm not religious enough for that, right? Like, Torah's for like the rabbis, right? And the rabbis think Torah's for the holier rabbis, right? But we misunderstand, right? Hashem argued, the angels made this argument. They were like, the Torah, don't send the Torah down because they're not worthy of it. They're gonna mess up. And Hashem said, no, that's who the Torah is made for. The Torah wasn't given to angels. It's not meant to be given to angels, right? Because angels don't struggle. It's meant for human beings who are going to struggle with it and grapple with it and use it to overcome their weaknesses.
What does that have to do with dairy?
Because dairy signifies this concept of the rabbinic law, right? Which the rabbinic of waiting in between meat and dairy. And the rabbinic law is there not because the thing itself is inherently harmful, but because it's there to protect us as human beings from doing something that's harmful.
So rabbinic law represents dairy? I'm not.
The waiting between meat and milk, because the Torah law is
The discipline.
the Torah law is you shouldn't eat meat and milk together, right? Rabbinic law is bringing in that you mustn't eat meat and dairy at the same meal, right? You mustn't eat meat and dairy at the same time, right? Again, depending on what the custom is how long you eat it, right? Which is a symbol of this concept of rabbinic law, right? What the rabbinic law is teaching us is that we as human beings are going to fail.
Yeah.
And that's why we have a safeguard. And the fact that we're going to fail is not because Torah is not meant for me and it's too hard or whatever. It's because that's who it's designed for. It's designed for human beings that are going to fail. Yes, were you going to say something? Yeah. It's a custom to eat dairy on Shavuot, right? You don't have to do it. It's a custom. I believe there's 7 different types of reasons that are given. One of them is because Torah is symbolized like milk, right? Like a mother's milk nourishes the baby, and that's all it relies on. The Torah nourishes us, right? That's one of the reasons. One of the reasons it's given is because this was the first time they were given the kosher laws, and they didn't have the means to cook meat because their dishes were not kosher, and dairy can be eaten raw. Right, so there's very many. I think there's at least 7 different reasons of why we eat dairy on Shavuot. One of them is also this concept of it reminds us of the concept of rabbinic law, right? So that's one of the reasons of it. Okay, how does the Torah challenge us to greatness?
A lot of ways.
Yeah.
Every mitzvah, everything that we're supposed to do and everything that we're not supposed to do. Everyone's got challenges for several of them. Everyone based on their nature, because we weren't created to like automatically, like angels who automatically are just created to do some specific thing and they do it. We're created where we could we could choose bad or good, and we're constantly having negative things bombard us. We're bombarded in this physical low world with all this physicality, and our animal soul, I guess you could say, tries to take over. Whereas the Torah is trying to get us to be higher than that and do what might not be what's called normal or the standard thing that everyone else is doing.
So let's look at some examples. Thank you. Shabbat, for example. How does the concept of Shabbat, considering that we, as human beings, how does it challenge us to be greater? Any ideas?
Stop using our phones.
Relationship with others, with self, and study, take a break, relax.
No, in general, as you said, it's not logical to keep Shabbat. It is between God and man. Man by itself cannot create Shabbat because it's not logical.
It's not logical, and it's interesting because again, like we'll come back to Shabbat, but I'll use kosher for example, right? Sometimes I've heard this from people in the past, right? That will tell me back in the day, kosher made sense, right? Because people were more primitive. Nowadays we have the FDA, right? We have rules in the country about how food is produced, etc. So we don't need it anymore, right? Because we know how to prepare healthy foods.
It takes it another level because it's
Yeah.
a humane way of like slaughtering, and so it's above the FDA. Like it's another step above.
Okay.
Yeah, and that makes you think, what does it mean to take a mother cow's milk and watch her kid being boiled in the milk? It makes you more sensitive.
Okay, so you're saying something very valuable here is and you're saying basically that kosher, and I'm gonna extrapolate a little bit from what you said. Kosher has nothing to do with health, and it's true,
Yeah.
right? You can eat a very healthy non-kosher diet, and you can eat a very unhealthy kosher diet, right?
That's
Like
right.
it's got nothing to do with health, but there are things that happen as a result of keeping kosher, right? There, for example, there's a story that's told of a woman who was shopping in a store in New York, and she sees this obviously non-Jewish looking woman with a 2-year-old, and the 2-year-old picks up a candy from the where they show them right where the kids can see them so that they can ask them, right? Sit up, and the mother turns around to this kid and says, "It's not kosher." So the other woman looks at her and says, "I hope you don't mind me asking. I heard that exchange that you just had with your kid. Are you Jewish?" And she says, "No, I'm not Jewish." So what's going on? And she says, "I don't know, but I see all the other women using it with their kids, and it works." It's a cute story.
It is.
The idea behind why does it work? Why does kosher work?
Teaches boundaries.
It teaches boundaries in a way that the parent keeps to, right? And it teaches boundaries in a consistent way. The child knows if this is a kosher keeping family, and the child asks the kid, mother or the father, wherever it is, for the candy, and the parent says it's not kosher, the child knows no matter how many times I'm going to ask 300 times, I'm still getting a no. So that's why it works, right? It's a discipline that the parent is keeping, right? You ask, whatever, the kid asks, picks up a candy, and the parent says to it, "Well, I don't know, you haven't had dinner yet." It's not going to work, right? Because the child knows, like, it depends. Sometimes, it'll be okay to have it before dinner. Sometimes it won't be okay to have it before dinner. But this idea of kosher is that discipline that it comes, and it's something so foundational to what we do. Like eating is such a huge part of our day. We do it so often, and it's this intentionality that we bring to this act of nourishment, where we kind of like stop and say no. There are some things that I'm going to put into my body, and there are some things that I'm not, and that there's that discipline that it inculcates within ourselves, right? Which is is that relevant to our lives nowadays to have that sort of discipline?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is that, I mean, can we see how that sort of discipline, if it spills over into other ways in a healthy way, would be beneficial to our life, right? Similarly, when it comes to Shabbat, for example, how easy is it nowadays to just get caught, someone said, put down your phone, right? To just get caught up in the grind, the day-to-day life, and never ever touch into that higher part of ourselves. And, what am I doing here? What am I living for? Am I investing in those in relationships that are important to me? Like, is that easy to kind of do? It's easy to fall into the trap of not doing it, right?
yeah,
And I think the more technologically advanced we get, the easier it is to kind of not fall into it. And that's what Shabbat sort of requires of us, is it says for 6 days you're going to work, you're going to be involved in the world, you're going you're going to put all your effort in, but one day a week you're going to step back from that and remind yourself that there's a higher power. You're going to connect to that higher power, you're going to connect to that higher purpose. Is that something again that we need these days?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think, well, the problem was a lot of people got away from keeping the laws when they immigrated to this country, like, I don't know, in the 1900s, late 1800s. And these people they were coming from like nothing. They weren't like, they didn't have money, and were setting up businesses, or they were working. And the US they weren't being supported, like they didn't have any way of like saying, oh, I'm just not going to come to work on Saturday or be fired. Or you have a business and you're trying to run a business, and then, oh, they're going to close shop on Saturday. So it was so much harder then for them to keep Shabbat. And that's when people started to get away from it.
It's interesting. There's a very interesting story that I'm going to share, which is slightly off topic, but whatever, you brought it out. So, but historically, in that time period when the Jews, a lot of Europeans came over from Europe to America, they sacrificed a lot. A lot of people would, they would get the job, and the job said, if you're not going to come in on Saturday, don't bother coming in on Monday. And they wouldn't, right? They wouldn't come in on Saturday, they wouldn't come in on Monday. And what happens is that the next generation weren't interested in doing that anymore. And someone once asked Rav Moshe Feinstein, who was a big rabbi, said, what happened, right? You have these parents that sacrificed for Judaism, and their kids just weren't interested in doing it. And he says, you know what happened? He says, the parents came home on Friday night, they sat at the Shabbat table, and they said, it's hard to be a Jew.
Right.
And the kids grew up with, it's true. It was true that it was hard to be a Jew in those days, right? I think we often take it for granted how lucky we have it, right? We live in a world nowadays where you're free to practice religion. There's laws in place, right, that they can't discriminate against religious practice. But he said what they were missing was the joy of Judaism. And it's important for us as people to recognize that when we want to make Judaism sustainable, right? We're going to talk about this a little bit on Monday night. I hope you can all come to Monday night. We're going to look at Ruth. We're going to look at the sustainability of it. But in order to make it sustainable, you also have to find the joy in Judaism as well, right? You have to sacrifice, right? It's like anything, right? Anything that's important, you have to sacrifice a little bit for it. And you have to also find the joy in it. Yeah. So we have 5 more minutes, 6 more minutes. Which ones do we want to do on the list? I don't know if we're going to get through all of them.
Returning lost objects.
But returning the lost object, there's a law in Judaism that if you find something and it can be identifiable, it's not finders keepers in Judaism. It's you find something, you have a mitzvah to return it to the person who it belongs to. How does that challenge us?
Well, it's a lot of money and we need money, you don't want to give it away.
Yeah.
No, it's effort and time.
I've never seen it like I did in Israel though. Like if they lost something, like it was amazing. It would be all over Facebook groups, it would be everywhere trying to get things back to you. They really do a decent job. Like if you lose your wallet, you don't have to worry.
Yes, I lost my wallet in Haifa,
Did you get it
in
back?
the north. I was living in Jerusalem. I got it back.
Yeah, that's
It's all
wow.
time.
And can I just point out something there? That's not just a two-person thing. That changes society as well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
A
Yeah,
society where you find something in the street and like finders keepers, if I could be very blunt, is a selfish society, right? A society that you find something in the street and the mindset is, let me find out who it is. Because hold on a second, put yourself in the other person's place. When you lose something, it's awful, right? You want to find it, you're like stressed about it. And if we as people find something and our reaction doesn't have to be our natural reaction. Our natural reaction could be, ooh, this looks really nice, I want it. Yet we take the moment to say, you know what, I'm going to do what the Torah demands of me, which is try and find it. And there's laws about how we do it and how much effort you have to put into it, etc. But is builds a society that cares about other people. You can see again, like there's so many different things, right? Building safety regulations, like in Jewish law, there's if you're building a roof on your house or whatever, and it's flat, you have to build a fence on it. Why is it that way? So that no one falls off it, right? Again, it's about thinking about the other person. It's not just about what's convenient for right now. Hey, you shouldn't be on trespassing on my property. You shouldn't, right? There's laws about that as well. And at the same time, it's training us to think about other people. It's training us to think about the consequences of our actions, right? Cruelty to animals is the same sort of idea there as well. It doesn't matter, right? This is an animal. The animal has feelings. You're gonna train yourself to be sensitive to this. Similarly, the laws of we have 1 minute left. The laws of menstrual separation laws, right? The laws in Jewish law, they're called Taharat Mishpacha, family purity. What it's doing is it's taking a relationship where it can become stale and it can become something that is, is just loses its spark over time. And it's bringing spirituality into that relationship. It's saying that we're going to bring a third partner into that relationship, right? It's not just me and my spouse. There's a higher power here, right? There's a God that we both subscribe to. And that totally, it takes like, the way I've heard it described is, you have a straight line, it's like a straight line, but if you bring a third point in, it becomes a triangle. Right? And it becomes this solid relationship as opposed to just me versus you. It's this idea that we're bringing spirituality into the relationship. We can go on and on about all the different mitzvos and show how each of those mitzvos is training us in a certain way. But I want to just wrap up with, again, this idea, this concept that Shavuot is coming up, and it's when we as people get to choose to say yes to the Torah. Thank you so much. No worries. And we have to remember who the Torah was given to. Right? The Torah is not given to angels. It's not given just to those super religious people. It's given to us who grapple and struggle with it. And it's kind of like, people who watch boxing, for example, right? If you think about it, it's such a gruesome sport.
Yeah, I don't want to.
What's the attraction to watching it? I don't know what the attraction is. There's an attraction to watching someone give it their all. Right, in the arena fighting, and that's what you don't have to relate to it at all, but it's popular, right? What this again, the analogy, what is it? Is that the Torah was given to us as human beings, right? As people who are going to fail. And that's not the problem. The problem isn't, that's not what the Torah isn't about, okay, you're going to be perfect, etc. It's about given to us, recognizing we're going to fail. We have weaknesses, we have struggles, we have temptations, we have things that we find difficult to understand. And at the same time, we have a desire to become a little bit better. And that's what perhaps is an opportunity to do on this year Shavuot, is to recommit that, get into the arena and just give it our all.
We can always, the Torah is such a high level that we can always aspire to get better. So you're always going to be able to improve because the Torah is like infinite in all the ways you can improve yourself. So you never stop growing.
Thank you.